Make something wonderful. Steve Jobs, in his own words.
There's lots of ways to be as a person. And some people express their deep appreciation in different ways. But one of the ways that I believe people express their appreciation to the rest of humanity is to make something wonderful and put it out there. And you never meet the people, you never shake their hands, you never hear their story or tell yours, but somehow in the act of making something with a great deal of care and love, something's transmitted there. And it's a way of expressing to the rest of our species our deep appreciation. So we need to be true to who we are and remember what's really important to us. That's what's going to keep Apple, Apple, is if we keep us, us.
Introduction by Lauren Powell Jobs. The best way to understand a person is to listen to that person directly. And the best way to understand Steve is to listen to what he said and wrote over the course of his life. His words, in speeches, interviews, and emails, offer a window into how he thought. And he was an exquisite thinker. Much of what's in these pages reflects guiding themes of Steve's life, his sense of the worlds that would emerge from marrying the arts and technology, his unbelievable rigor, which he imposed first and most strenuously on himself, his tenacity in pursuit of assembling and leading great teams, and perhaps, above all, his insights into what it means to be human. Steve once told a group of students, "You appear, have a chance to blaze in the sky, then you disappear." He gave an extraordinary amount of thought to how best to use our fleeting time. He was compelled by the notion of being part of the arc of human existence, animated by the thought that he, or that any of us, might elevate or expedite human progress. It is hard enough to see what is already there, to gain a clear view. Steve's gift was greater still. He saw clearly what was not there, what could be there, what had to be there. His mind was never a captive of reality. Quite the contrary, he imagined what reality lacked and set out to remedy it. His ideas were not arguments, but intuitions, born of a true inner freedom and an epic sense of possibility. In these pages, Steve drafts and refines. He stumbles, grows, and changes, but always, always, he retains that sense of possibility. I hope these selections ignite in you the understanding that drove him, that everything that makes up what we call life was made by people no smarter, no more capable than we are, that our world is not fixed, and so we can change it for the better.
Well, I was very lucky. I had a father named Paul who was a pretty remarkable man. He'd never graduated from high school. He joined the Coast Guard in World War II and ferried troops around the world for General Patton, I guess. And I think he was always getting into trouble and getting busted down to what's private, I think, is the lowest, right? Yeah. But he was a machinist by trade and worked very hard and was kind of a genius with his hands. And he had a workbench out in the garage where, when I was about 5 or 6, he sectioned off a little piece of it and said, "Steve, this is your workbench now." And he gave me some of his smaller tools, you know, showed me how to use a hammer and a saw and how to build things. And it really was very good for me. You know, he spent a lot of time with me teaching me how to build things, take things apart, put things back together. And one of the things that he touched upon was electronics. He did not have a deep understanding of electronics himself, but he'd encountered electronics a lot in automobiles and other things that he would fix. So he showed me the rudiments of electronics, and I got very interested in that. And then I grew up in Silicon Valley. My parents moved from San Francisco to Mountain View when I was 5. My dad had gotten transferred. And that was right in the heart of Silicon Valley. So there were engineers kind of all around. And Silicon Valley at that time was still orchards for the most part. I mean, it was apricot orchards and prune orchards. And it was really paradise. I remember there not being... I remember almost every day the air being crystal clear, where you could see from one end of the valley to the other.
And this was when you were 6, 7,
Yeah.
8 years old at
Right,
this time.
exactly. And it was really the most wonderful place in the world to grow up. And there was a man that moved in down the street, maybe about 6 or 7 houses down the block, who was new in the neighborhood with his wife. And it turned out he was an engineer at Hewlett-Packard, and he was a ham radio operator and really into electronics. And what he did to get to know the kids on the block was a rather strange thing. He put out a carbon microphone and a battery and a speaker on his driveway where you could talk into the microphone and your voice would get amplified on the speaker. It's kind of a strange thing to do when you move into a neighborhood, but that's what he did.
This is great.
And I, of course, started messing around with this, and I'd always been taught that you needed an amplifier to amplify the voice of a microphone for it to come out of a speaker.
Oh, yeah.
My father had taught me that, so I went home and proudly announced to my father that he was all wrong and that this man up the block was amplifying voice with just a battery. My father told me I didn't know what I was talking about. We got into a very large argument about this, so I dragged him down and showed him this, and he himself was a little befuddled. And I got to know this man whose name was Larry Lang, and he taught me a lot of electronics too. He was great. And he used to build, you know, Heath kits, which they don't really have anymore. But Heath kits were really great. These Heath kits were these products that you would buy in kit form. You'd actually pay more money for them than you would if you just went and bought the finished product, if it was available. But these Heath kits would come with detailed manuals and on how to put this thing together, and all the parts would be laid out in a certain way and color-coded, and you'd actually build this thing yourself. And I would say that gave one several things. It gave one an understanding of what was inside a finished product and how it worked, because it would all include a theory of operation. But maybe even more importantly, it gave one the sense that one could build the things that one saw around oneself in the universe. I mean, you see, these things were not mysteries anymore. When you looked at a television set, you would think, well, I haven't built one of those, but I could. There's one of those in the Heathkit catalog, and I built 2 other Heathkits. So I could build a television set. I could build, you know, things became much more clear that they were the results of human creation, not these magical things that just appeared in one's environment and one had no knowledge of their interiors. So it gave one a tremendous degree of self-confidence that through exploration and learning one could understand seemingly very complex things in one's environment. And so, you know, that was my childhood was very fortunate in that way.
Yeah,
I had a rough time in school.
It sounds like you were really lucky to have your dad as both a sort of a mentor and a hero. And I was going to ask you about school. What was the formal side of your education like? Good, bad,
School was
indifferent?
pretty hard for me at the beginning. My mother had taught me how to read before I got to school, and so when I got there, I really just wanted to do 2 things. I wanted to read books, because I loved reading books, and I wanted to go outside and chase butterflies and do all the things that, you know, 5-year-olds like to do. And I encountered authority of a different kind than I'd ever encountered before, and I did not like it. And they almost got me. They came this close to really beating any curiosity out of me. By the time I was in 3rd grade, I'd had a good buddy of mine, Rick Ferrantino, and the only way we had fun was to create mischief. And we used to do things like, I remember one time we traded everybody. There was a big bike rack where everybody put their bikes, maybe 100 bikes in this bike rack, and we traded everybody our lock combinations for theirs on an individual basis, and then went out one day and put everybody's lock in everybody else's bike, and it took them until about 10 o'clock that night to get all the bikes unsorted and stuff like that. We'd set off explosives in teachers' desks and stuff, and it was pretty serious. We got kicked out of school a lot. And And
yeah.
in 4th grade, I encountered one of the other saints in my life, which was, they discovered they were going to put me and this guy, Rick Ferrantino, into the same 4th grade class, and the principal said at the last minute, no, bad idea, separate them. So this teacher, Mrs. Hill, said, I'll take one of them, and she taught the advanced 4th grade class, and thank God I was the random one that got put in her class. And she watched me for about 2 weeks, and she then approached me. She said, Stephen, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. I have this math workbook, and if you take it home and finish it on your own without any help, and you bring it back to me, if you get it 80% right, I will give you $5 and one of these really big suckers. She bought it. She held it out in front of me, one of these giant things. And I looked at her like, are you crazy, lady? You know, nobody's ever done this before. And, of course, I did it. And she basically bribed me back into learning with candy and money. And what was really remarkable was that, you know, before very long, I had such a respect for her that I sort of reignited my desire to learn. And she was remarkable. She got me kits for making cameras. You know, I ground my own lens and made a camera, and it was really quite wonderful. And I think I probably learned more academically that 1 year than I've ever learned in my life.
My parents never pushed me to go to college, but they always wanted to make sure that if I wanted to go, they had the resources to do it. And they really sacrificed some and saved some money up for me to attend Reed College. But after 6 months, it just seemed really absurd to be spending their life savings putting me through college. I did not know enough about what I wanted to do. And besides that, I figured I could drop out and then drop back in and take the classes anyway and learn just as much. So I dropped out after 6 months, and then I dropped in for a little over a year. I spent about 1.5 years there, maybe close to 2 years, and I enjoyed it greatly. It was a hard time in my life, but I enjoyed it a lot. I did not know what I wanted to do with my life. And Reed was a very intense place, very bright people. Everyone out to change the world, but not knowing quite how. The early 70s was the time that sort of Eastern mysticism hit the shores of the United States. And we had a constant flow of people traveling through Reed, stopping off at Reed. Everyone from Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert to Gary Snyder, people like that. So there is a constant flow of intellectual questioning about the truth of life and existence. The idealistic wind of the 60s was still at our back, and most of the people that I know that are my age have that ingrained in them forever. They have that idealism in them, but they also have a certain cautiousness about sort of ending up working in a natural food store behind the counter when they're 45 years old, which is what they saw some of their older friends doing. Not that that is bad in and of itself, but it is bad if that is not what you really set out to do or what you really wanted to be doing. So that idealism was formed, but also the feeling that there had to be a more successful way of realizing some of that idealism. Steve also recalled his time in California and India after leaving Reed College. I came back down to the San Francisco Bay Area because I decided I wanted to travel, but I was lacking necessary funds. This was California. You can get LS Fresh made from Stanford University. You can go sleep on the beach at night with your girlfriends and whatever meaningful others. I did not really realize how different California was than the middle of America, and even to some extent the East Coast, until I traveled to those places. I had never been to any of those places until my early 20s. California has a sense of experimentation about it, and a sense of openness about it. Openness and new possibility. I really did not appreciate till I went to other places. So I came back down to get a job, and I was looking in the paper, and there was this ad that talked about being an engineer and having fun at the same time. It sounded like fun, so I called. It was video game manufacturer Atari. And I filled out an application, just listed all the things that I had done, and the personnel woman said, well, do not call us, we will call you. But then some stroke of luck got my application to a man named Al Alcorn, who was the vice president of engineering at Atari at the time. And he called me up the next day and hired me. And it was great. I was there a little less than a year, and they had shipped a bunch of games to Europe that had some engineering defects in them. I figured out how to fix them, but it was necessary for somebody to go over there and actually do the fixing. So I volunteered to go. Well, they asked me if I would go, and I said I definitely would love to, but I would like to take a leave of absence when I was there. So they let me do that, and I ended up in Switzerland and flew from Zurich to New Delhi. And I spent some time in India. I am stupefied to sort of summarize my trip to India. Anyone would have a hard time summarizing a meaningful experience of their life in a page. I mean, if I was William Faulkner, I might be able to do it for you, but I am not. Coming back was more of a culture shock than going. All I really wanted to do after returning to California was to go find a grassy meadow and just sit. I did not want to drive a car. I did not want to go to San Francisco or do all these things. I did not want to do it. So I did not for about 3 months. I just read and sat. When you are a stranger in a place, you notice things that you rapidly stop noticing when you become familiar. I was a stranger in America for the first time in my life, and so I saw things I had never seen before. And I tried to pay attention to them for those 3 months, because I knew that gradually, bit by bit, my familiarity would be gained again.